And here it is again. I'm showing where the socket stones were. We actually found the corners of the pyramid. Next. This shows that granite was used there. It was built the same style. So the Egyptologists say this was inferior. That's why it collapsed. It was not inferior. It's built just the same technology as the Great Pyramid, part of the Buwizir Pernetters. Granite was used here too. Next. And, okay, this is part of the explosion hypothesis. Let me go one back. Can you reverse one? We use this to show that this, I say, evidence I'm gathering to support this explosion hypothesis is not just in the Great Pyramid, but through the whole grid line of what was Buwizir. And so this pyramid, I say, was destroyed, that it shook so violently during this event, which I document in my second book as occurring 11,500 years ago, a worldwide catastrophe, which is mentioned in two other books, Catastrophobia by Barbara Hand Clow, and a book called Cataclysm 9500 BC, all put out by Barron Company by two British authors, Allen and Dallaire, that there is distinct evidence that there was a worldwide cataclysmic event 11,500 years ago. David talked about many of them. This is one, maybe the most recent. I think it destroyed this pyramid. Next slide. We'll show you the other evidence. We go back to the so-called bent pyramid. Again, Egyptologists say, well, this was quarried. This was attacked by the Egyptian Arabs in the last couple of hundred years. The sides are easier to attack the corners than the main structure. So they pulled off not only the casing stones, but core masonry, and they used the blocks. Well, that's an interesting idea, maybe, but why is the stone still there? Most of the stone is still there. If they attacked this pyramid to use the stone, why did they leave the stone there? No. I say this is part of the explosion we talk about. The side, the corners being the weakest. When this pyramid shook violently, the sides blew off. Because they didn't attack the casing stones. If they're going to quarry this pyramid, the casing stones would be easier to remove than the core masonry. Believe me. And they didn't. I speculate this is also a part of this cataclysm. Next. Here's the evidence of advanced machining. Christopher will talk more about this. He'll talk about the precision, tolerances. We just took our group here. It's always great to use this. This piece of evidence is right out in front, right by the Sphinx. Everybody can see it. It's just right for Christopher and I. Next slide is Christopher took this picture of me in 1999. That's why I don't wear shorts anymore with these bony knees. But anyway, here, this is incredible. It takes a man like Chris Dunn with 40 years experience in materials manufacturing and high-speed technology to address this type of precision. You think this was done by copper chisels. We have a bridge in Brooklyn we can talk about after we're done. Next. I have to move quickly because I've got to get to the other slides. This is at Elephantine. We didn't take our people near Aswan. Another example of advanced machine that Chris will talk about. This was a shrine, one single piece of granite. Look at the work on it, like it was turned on a lathe, like it's made out of clay and sculpted. This is granite, weighs 100 tons if it weighs an ounce. And the question is, what knocked it on its side? Not people trying to quarry it. 100 tons? Something happened to knock it on its side. Again, a cataclysmic event. Next. Here we are in the Cairo Museum. These are so-called sarcophagus made of alabaster. They are not sarcophagus. These boxes were used for acoustic harmonic resonance. Look at the polish on it. I'm actually discussing with a tour group in 1999 Chris's theories on advanced machining, how this could not be done by simple mechanical tools. The toolkits we see are the dynastic people. Could not be done. Next. Here's the unfinished obelisk. Chris will talk more. We were just there. David and I, Chris, we had so much fun here. This is one, this looks like it's cracked, but originally was one single piece of granite. David showed you Baalbek, which has objects weighing 2,000 tons. They are more, but this is supposedly the longest object ever found. It's 120 feet long, estimated to weigh 1,200 tons. Egyptologists tell you, well, they couldn't complete it. It cracked when they were working on it, so they left it there. Well, David was the one, when we went there, when underneath found the crack on the underside. They didn't discover the crack. These cracks are more modern. They didn't discover the crack till the stone was dressed. And they were ready to undercut it, to finish it, to lift it, and put it into position. They didn't discover the crack until they got underneath, because the crack is on the underside. So they had every intention of finishing this piece and lifting it into position. And maybe that's the time to talk about that. How did they do that? Well, I'll just give you the indigenous tradition. Oh, we're coming to that. We're going to come to that. Next slide. There it is. In the Cairo Museum, I can take you all to see this, folks. It's right out there in the open. It's mislabeled by British Egyptologist Walter Emery as being a ceremonial plate for lotuses. He had no other idea what it was. He found this cache in Saqqara in 1936 that had 10,000 objects made of stone. And they don't have no idea what this was about. This is a schist plate, volcanic stone, very hard to carve. Looks like it's made out of clay, like it's actually made on a potter's wheel. It's almost razor thin, very thin, quarter of an inch, half an inch at most in radius. It has these 3 lips on it, which you can't see too clearly, and a centered device. Hakim says this object was made to spin on a separate device, producing a sound frequency with the use of the human voice, with a sound frequency, with running water to create an electromagnetic field, with crystals to amplify this electromagnetic field. They created a sound frequency which overcame the force of gravity, and that's how they cut, lifted, and shifted stone, by the use of sound, ultrasonics, and that's, today it's being used. There actually is hydrotacs used now. They usually use water jets coming at tremendous pressure now to shape stone. So we're saying anti-gravitics. David has some wonderful books that, if you don't know the Wex catalog, about anti-gravity, theories about anti-gravity. This is what comes from the indigenous people. Further in the Cairo Museum. Now these look like plates, okay? We could give Emery credit here. These could be some, but not this. Again, schist. This looks like it's part of a machine. It's part of another device. It was meant to fit together and spin, rotate. That's the indigenous theory, folks. Anti-gravity is how the Great Pyramid was built. A 1,000-ton block, 200-ton block weighs nothing if gravity's not involved. And we think it could have been a team of as little as 800 people could have built the Great Pyramid. Here is the tunnels. I talked about being in the tunnels. Underneath the Giza Plateau, there's a tunnel. It's called the Temple of Four Guardians. I can take you to it. You go down a space of around 30 feet. You come to where there's all sorts of stones, limestone blocks that are blocking an entrance, obviously put there by someone who, Supreme Council of Antiquities, they don't want you to see. I forced a hole, I put my camera through it, shot down, and here is under the limestone bedrock. Again, these type of tunnels. Now, it ends in a dead end here. Now, here's some other stones that have been placed here. Who placed them here? Supreme Council of Antiquities. Why? This tunnel makes a distinct left turn, and where does it go? To the Sphinx. All these tunnels were interconnected, water flowing like the veins in our body, like the arterial system in our body. I go into much more detail in my book about this concept. Tunnels crisscrossing, water flowing, creating electromagnetic fields. Next. Here's a great glyph that's at Edfu, which was the Per word, the teaching temple. House, Per, T, Pert, Asgat. House of water. What's the house of water? There it is. Perneter, pyramid. Pyramid connected to water. The house of water is the pyramid. Clear. Here it is again. Pyramid, Perneter, Asgat, water. Water connected to the pyramid. Clear. No argument to me, no debate. Next. And here's another symbol which I've given to a friend of ours who's on our group. Here's what's called, the Waterman glyph. Here's a man in adoration. This is the N, actually the consonant N in the glyphs. It's also a symbol for water. Another symbol for water, Asgat. This inscription was put there to say that this individual who they're talking about was considered wise because they knew the secrets of water. And here's another one, real interesting. Mer-E. It means beloved in the ancient Comitian language. It's where the name Mary comes from. Mary was not a name. It was a title. It actually applied to both men and women. Mary, the beloved. It shows how a lot of the names we have today, I discussed this more in the book that's going to be out next year, came from titles. Mary is Mary. It's a title, not a name. Here's the Per word. We found this in 1999, the 5th Per at Edfu, the house of the wise man. That means Edfu was a particular temple that was a teaching temple. So this particular area of the temple was what became the first university where people would come to learn. The Per word, the house of the wise man. Next. Here's in front of the Sphinx. This is an ancient dock where boats would come. It's quite obvious that boats docked here. The Egyptologists have no explanation to say that, well, the Nile would overflow and come here, but this is not the current Nile that we're talking about. It's the Nile that was over here, the Western Desert. Boats actually came around, came in front of the Sphinx to bring offerings to her like a customs point, like a disembarkation point. Next. And this we're working on. This is not as clear as the Sphinx, but this is the west side of the Great Pyramid. Here are some of the original casing stones still left. Now, this pyramid facing west is not subject to wind and sand, to the type of erosion that usually appears, because the wind in Egypt is known as the khamsin. It comes out of the south, and I've been there when it happens, and it can just scorch your eyes. That's why you usually have these little Arabic face masks to protect you from the sand and wind. You saw that in Lawrence of Arabia, whoever saw that movie. But this doesn't face the sand, the wind and sand. This faces the west. So the only type of erosion I speculate that this could be water.